The American Revolution was a beacon of liberty and self-determination. It proclaimed the radical idea that all men are created equal. Yet this noble ideal coexisted with the brutal reality of slavery. Dr. Samuel Johnson, a contemporary critic, famously asked, "How is it that we hear so much about the rights of man from those who own and traffic in slaves?" This paradox lay at the heart of the new nation. It was a contradiction that the Founding Fathers, despite their brilliance and foresight, could not fully reconcile. The colonists yearned for freedom from British tyranny. They chafed under unjust taxes and restrictions on their liberties, yet they simultaneously denied freedom to hundreds of thousands of Africans held in bondage. This hypocrisy did not go unnoticed. Abolitionist voices, though initially few, began to challenge the morality of slavery. They pointed out the glaring inconsistency between the ideals of the revolution and the practice of enslavement. The Founding Fathers, products of their time, were deeply enmeshed in this complex web of liberty and oppression. Many, including George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, inherited slaves from their families. They understood the economic importance of slavery to the agrarian South. Yet they also grappled with the moral implications of their actions. Their writings and speeches reveal a deep ambivalence, a recognition of slavery's inherent wrongness alongside an inability to fully break free from its grip. The American Revolution, therefore, was not a singular event that cleanly severed the ties of oppression. It was a messy, contradictory affair. It was a period of both great hope and stark hypocrisy. The seeds of liberty, sown in the fires of revolution, would take generations to fully blossom and dismantle the institution of slavery. In the 18th century, slavery was deeply entrenched in the fabric of colonial America. It was not merely a Southern institution, it existed in all 13 colonies. While the North utilized slaves primarily in domestic service and skilled labor, the South built its agricultural economy on enslaved Africans. Vast plantations producing lucrative crops like tobacco, rice, and indigo relied heavily on slave labor. This economic dependence on slavery would profoundly shape the South's identity and its resistance to abolition. The transatlantic slave trade brought millions of Africans to the Americas against their will. They endured horrific conditions on slave ships, and those who survived faced a life of forced labor and brutal treatment. Families were torn apart, their cultures and traditions suppressed. The dehumanizing system of slavery stripped Africans of their basic human rights, reducing them to mere property in the eyes of the law. This brutal institution was not without its critics even in the colonial era. Religious groups like the Quakers condemned slavery on moral grounds. Enlightenment thinkers questioned the very basis of one person owning another. The seeds of abolitionism were slowly being sown, but the economic and political power of the slaveholding class remained largely unchallenged. The American Revolution, however, would bring the issue of slavery to the forefront of national debate. The colonists' fight for freedom from British rule inevitably raised questions about the freedom of those held in bondage within their own borders. The hypocrisy of demanding liberty while denying it to others became increasingly difficult to ignore. The Founding Fathers grappled with the thorny issue of slavery. Many recognized its contradiction to the ideals of liberty and equality, yet they were products of their time where slavery was accepted. Their views varied, reflecting moral qualms, economic pragmatism, and political expediency. Thomas Jefferson penned, "All men are created equal," but was a slaveholder. He drafted a passage condemning the slave trade, removed due to Southern opposition. Later, as president in 1807, he signed a bill that banned any American from participation in the international slave trade, and authorized the confiscation of slave ships and freeing of all on board. George Washington inherited slaves, and his views evolved over time. In his will, he provided for the emancipation of his slaves. Benjamin Franklin initially accepted slavery, but later became a vocal abolitionist. He served as president of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society. Their legacy on slavery is complex, marked by contradictions and gradual shifts. The Revolutionary War, a fight for liberty and self-determination, ignited a fierce debate about the institution of slavery. The colonists' demand for freedom from British rule inevitably raised questions about the freedom of those held in bondage within their own borders. The inherent hypocrisy of fighting for their own liberty while denying it to others became glaringly apparent. The British, recognizing this moral dilemma, sought to exploit the situation to their advantage. They offered freedom to slaves who were willing to fight for the crown, even though slavery was not abolished in England until 1833. This tactic, while strategically astute, further exposed the contradictions at the heart of the American Revolution. It forced colonists to confront the reality that their struggle for freedom was intertwined with the plight of enslaved Africans. The Continental Army, initially hesitant to arm black soldiers, eventually recognized the military necessity of enlisting all available men. Black soldiers fought with distinction in various battles, demonstrating their courage and patriotism. Their service challenged prevailing prejudices and highlighted the contributions of African Americans to the fight for independence. The Revolutionary War, therefore, served as a catalyst for change. It brought the issue of slavery to the forefront of national consciousness. The ideals of liberty and equality, espoused so passionately by the colonists, inevitably cast a critical light on the institution of slavery. The war, while ultimately securing American independence, also exposed the moral contradictions within the new nation, setting the stage for the long and arduous struggle for abolition. In the midst of the Revolutionary War, Lord Dunmore, the Royal Governor of Virginia, issued a proclamation that sent shockwaves through the colonies. Seeking to undermine the rebellion, Dunmore's proclamation offered freedom to any enslaved person who joined the British forces. This audacious move exposed the deep-seated hypocrisy at the heart of the American Revolution and ignited a firestorm of controversy. Southern slaveholders were outraged, viewing Dunmore's proclamation as a direct attack on their property and way of life. They feared the potential for widespread slave revolts and the economic devastation that would follow if their workforce was decimated. The proclamation also presented a moral dilemma for the patriots who were fighting for their own liberty while simultaneously denying it to others. The response from the black community was immediate and significant. Thousands of enslaved Africans, enticed by the promise of freedom, fled their plantations and joined the British ranks. They became known as Black Loyalists and fought bravely for the crown. Their decision to side with the British, often portrayed as an act of betrayal by white Americans, was a testament to their desperate desire for freedom and their recognition of the hypocrisy inherent in the colonists' fight for liberty. Lord Dunmore's proclamation, while ultimately a failed military strategy, had a profound impact on the course of the American Revolution. It exposed the moral contradictions at the heart of the colonists' cause and highlighted the crucial role that black Americans played in the conflict. The proclamation also intensified the debate over slavery, forcing Americans to confront the chasm between their ideals of liberty and the reality of their actions.